Welcome to the Legal Insurrection Podcast. Today is June 26th, and this is episode 29. I'm Kimberly Kay with the Legal Insurrection Foundation, and I'm here with Professor Jacobson, our president and founder. And it's been a while. It's nice to be back, but it's not because we've been neglecting the podcast on purpose. It's because we have been very, very, very busy. It's a very exciting time for us over at the foundation. But we're excited and happy to be here today. So let's go ahead and jump in. So, I mean, unless you've had your hole in the sand, your head in the sand. Gosh, I feel like my mother. I used to always make fun of her for mixing idioms. And the older I get, I do this on a daily basis, and I'm pretty sure I have completely confused my children who don't know any different at this point. But unless you've had your head in the sand, it would be very difficult to miss what's happening in Iran these days. Because, of course, as Trump tends to do, he blows up the weekend news cycle. And we find out over the weekend that he has bombed Iran's nuclear sites. So there's a whole lot to unpack there. And I think in going back, when he talked about, he was very particular with his wording when he said everyone will know within, 12 or 14 days, what my decision will be. It's because he made it obvious what his decision was. It wasn't wait 2 weeks and then I'll tell you, which is, I think, how most people understood it. We find out over the weekend, well, I guess he's made up his mind and this is what he's going to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the language he used was within 2 weeks. And when he did it 2 days later, everybody says, "Oh, you said you were going to wait for 2 weeks." No, he said within 2 weeks. 2 days is within 2 weeks. But stepping back, this before the bombs were dropped on Fordow and Natanz and the third nuclear enrichment site in Iran, it was a 10-day war between Israel and Iran. By the time the U.S. sent over the B-2 bombers, Israel had essentially destroyed in the entirety of Iran their air defense systems. Israel had eliminated their 2 or 3 dozen top commanders at the outset, had eliminated their entire nuclear scientist team working on weaponization. At the outset, it reminded me, if people recall, with Hezbollah, the beepers, that they just went off. Well, on the first night of Israel's attack, they attacked the apartments of 12 of the top nuclear weapons scientists, and they decapitated the Iranian command, including by sending a message telling everybody to come to a meeting, and then they bombed the meeting. I mean, it was just like Hezbollah. It's like, Iran, did you not just witness what they did? And that's what it was. So Iran apparently, I mean, we only know what we read in the papers and elsewhere or online, apparently, knowing at some point Israel would attack, had 1,000 ballistic missiles in their launchers ready to go. Because Israel eliminated their entire command chain at the outset, there was no one to give the command to fire. Okay, so that bought Israel like an hour or 2 or 3 or however, but it bought them time because there was nobody to say fire. And in that 2 to 3 hours, they used that to destroy more. And so it really was a breathtaking engagement by Israel. They didn't just bomb nuclear-related sites. They bombed ballistic missile production facilities. They bombed the fiber plant that created the carbon fiber for their ballistic missiles. They basically spent 10 days not only eliminating all air defenses, but eliminating the chain of command, but eliminating also the production capability. And so that's really was amazing to see. And that paved the way for when last Saturday we were able to fly with no opposition, with no fire, no counterfire, no anti-aircraft missiles, those B-2s, and drop, I think it was 14 of these massive ordnance bombs. I mean, people call them bunker busters, but the bunker busters are more commonly used and they're like 2-ton bombs. These were 30,000-pound bombs meant for this purpose. So it really was quite amazing that Israel was able to accomplish this. Now, they did take a hit from ballistic missiles because eventually Iran was able to get their act together and fired wildly pretty much into the center of Israeli cities. But Israel has very good air defenses, anti-ballistic missile defenses, 95% success rate shooting them down. 95% sounds good, but 5% got through, and 5% of 600 ballistic missiles is a lot. So it really was amazing, and I do want to talk more about what Trump did, but people need to look in awe at what Israel accomplished because nobody thought that was possible. Israel's public estimates were they were going to suffer several thousand dead in the Iranian ballistic missile barrage. They expected 1,000 at one time, as opposed to 600 over 10 days. And so it really was astounding. It was completely lopsided. It was so complete a victory that Israel had complete air supremacy over the entirety of the country of Iran, which is a huge country. I think I saw it today, it's like 2 or 3 times the size of Texas. Okay, we're
I
not
was
talking
gonna
about
say,
a
how many Texases is
how
it?
many
That's
Texas.
always a
So
measurement
I
down
think
here.
it's three. I think it's 3 Texases. So they had complete air superiority to the extent that the Iranians could not fly diplomats to talks in Europe without getting permission from the Israelis. That's how complete it was. So
Love
it
it.
really was astounding. But at the end of the day, Israel probably did not have the bombers to take out the main enrichment plant, which is built under a mountain, okay, in Iran, Fordow, Fordow. And there was a lot of debate, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Should we do anything? Should we not do anything?
So one of the things I thought was really interesting immediately following this, which as soon as I saw it come across my X feed, the conflicting reports, right? So we had confirmation that the targets had been hit and annihilated to the point where their nuclear program was substantially set back, if not obliterated, in the way that they had hoped. And then we see CNN pop up and they're talking about how actually it only set their program back a couple of months. And as soon as I saw that, I'm going, sure, really? Is that what we're going to go with here? To make really to try and downplay the military successes that we had alongside of Israel. So, I mean, what was your take
Yeah.
on that when you saw that?
Well, there's nothing that gets Trump as angry as when you downplay his successes. Okay.
True.
And he felt like somebody was taking his win away. Okay, like they
Mm-hmm.
stole the election, now they're stealing his win. Okay,
Right.
and so there has been a major push by the administration to counteract that. But that's CNN. CNN gets a anonymous leak or a leak from someone they are not identifying of a report that uh, at most it set it back by 2 or 3 or 4 months. Of course, this is the same CNN which said Iran has no nuclear weapons program.
Right.
So how do they
Right.
go from not having a program so that we don't need to intervene militarily to having a program that was only set back 2 to 3 months? Um,
Right.
all of the information that's coming out, other than CNN, is that it was either completely obliterated or, I mean, the uh, International Atomic Energy Group that monitors Iran says that the centrifuges were destroyed completely. They're non-functional. I mean, these are sensitive scientific devices. And you drop a bunch of bombs in there, even if you don't hit them directly, just the blast and the pressurization is probably enough. Uh, you know, the Israelis seem to be of that view. And so I think by all accounts, the Iranian enrichment program, if not completely obliterated, has been damaged for many years to come. It apparently took like 8 or 9 years for them to dig Fortau, the enrichment site. And they literally built it under a mountain for this purpose. with dozens of yards of reinforced concrete and steel and blast doors and everything else. But they had one weakness, which was they need ventilation for it. The US apparently dropped these big bombs um, into the ventilation shafts. Okay, so that was really important. But I think one thing that I paid a lot of attention to, particularly on X, was the attempt by certain people, most prominently Tucker Carlson. And for those of you who don't know, while I greatly appreciated the help he gave Legal Insurrection when he was at Fox, I'm completely soured on him after he left Fox. I think he's been a malign force in many different ways. But in this way, because he has such a large audience, he gets on there and says, "This is going to be World War III. We cannot do anything. We cannot intervene. This is going to be Iraq all over again." Just wild. People coined the term panic con. So conservatives who can panic con, as if we were going to send several 100,000 troops like we did in Iraq to invade Iran. Like there's nothing between, in the Tucker Carlson world and his followers and acolytes, there was nothing between doing nothing and letting them get a nuclear bomb or going to a full-scale land invasion. But of course, there was a lot in between that. We're not paralyzed. And Trump found a third way, which is let Israel do most of the work and then come in and drop what we have that nobody else in the world has. So it was a really nasty scene on X, formerly Twitter. Real, I just call it Jew baiting. A lot of people like Tucker and his crowd. Basically, I'm not going to die for Israel. I don't want my child serving for Israel. Tucker Carlson. Why is Mark Levin arguing we should do something? Why doesn't he go fight there? Why should my kids have to fight? I mean, really nonsense. We're selling out to Israel. Trump is Netanyahu's puppet. Here we go again. And obviously a lot more malicious people on X, like Candace Owens.
I was just about to mention her too.
Playing that whole thing. And that was kind of an under thing here. And they're saying that you're going to divide the base, okay? You're going to split the MAGA base. Well, I think Trump knows the MAGA base better than Tucker Carlson knows the MAGA base, because all of the polling that's come out, and I mean literally all of it, show that upwards of 90% of people who identify themselves as MAGA Republicans supported the bombing that Trump did. And I think 80+% of Republicans supported it. Of course, Democrats mostly opposed it. But so there was that whole noxious subset that's been brewing in, on X among influencers, big influencers, people with millions of followers. America first. I'm for America first, but that doesn't mean we're isolationist. That doesn't mean we're helpless.
That's the expectation. So on the one hand, I can understand being skeptical and a little bit apprehensive. I was in college when 9/11 happened, and I went to I guess Texas A&M University is the second largest feeder to military academies and the second largest feeder to, or I guess second largest feeder of officers that come out of their ROTC program out of college outside of the military academies. So it has a huge ROTC presence. So my freshman year of college, to date myself precisely here, 9/11 happens. We watch it all happen on TV. And then I watch en masse, like no joke, thousands of kids my age who withdraw from college and enlist, um, and they go to fight. They go to fight in this post 9/11 war, and we all know how that turned out. But all of that to say, the reaction by these people has crossed over from apprehension into, as you pointed out, something incredibly vile and disgusting. And it's anti-Israelism. It's the Jew baiting. It's just all kinds of disgusting things that have nothing to do with military strategy. And it's, and I like you, I kind of parted ways with any kind of, I guess, I haven't, all that to say, and I just cannot English today, which is really not helpful since we're recording a podcast. But I haven't listened to him and since he left Fox either, when it became pretty clear exactly where he stood on a handful of things. But, this whole idea that, as you mentioned, that there's nothing in between is just such logical fallacy through and through. And I think one of the things that I really appreciated in what Trump decided to do here, and whatever, all of his advisors, whatever the final decision came down to, and whomever was involved in that, is that Iran has been such an atrocious and terrible bully since the 70s. The American lives lost, I think people tend to forget that, not just directly from their activity, but from what and who they have funded over these decades. They have been a loud and proud bully. They have cost, I mean, like I said, innumerable damage, countless lives, not just American lives, but lives of our allied countries. Um, and the fact that we went in and just blew them out of the water, they are the bully that needs a punch in the face. And everyone screaming and setting their hair on fire about World War III, I think it's just further illustrative of their ignorance of the situation, of Israel's role in the region. It's not just about Jews in Israel. It's about the fact that it's really the only substantially developed country in the region, and for what it stands for in the region compared to its neighbors and counterparts. And that's why many countries hate Israel, which is a separate discussion entirely. But I think it was really telling to me watching the people who were freaking out about this as though it's a precursor to World War III. I expected some kind of retaliation from Iran just because they're not going to not do anything. But I also don't believe that they're dumb enough to mount some large scale attack that would draw the full force and ire of the American military presence, and other people who were on our side with it either. So all of that to say, I mean, it's been very telling. It's been very eye-opening. The usual suspects came out grossly against this, and like I said, on one hand, I'm somewhat sympathetic to the skepticism and to the apprehension, but to the degree to which they've taken this, and they're not even pretending anymore, and I think that's even more telling, has been really disappointing. Not that I have high expectations for these people, but at least now the masks are completely off and we know exactly what they stand for, because they've been pretending that they don't agree with these things or believe these things or say these things up until this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really noxious side, but I'm glad that the polling has come out the way it's come out to show that these vile people who I'm convinced are promoted by foreign entities. I'm not saying they necessarily
Completely
get
agree.
cash from them, but they get
Completely
promoted
agree.
by the bots and the foreign accounts. And, there's this really insane guy, something Carroll, who you've never heard of 2 years ago, and all of a sudden has over 1 million followers because all he does is spend all day with conspiracy theories. Well, have we ever really asked whether the Israelis were behind the JFK killing? I mean, literally, okay, that's the sort of stuff.
Right.
Basically,
Right.
prove to us you weren't behind it, and
Right.
gets boosted and promoted. And it's really vile. I was very much in favor, and I'm still on balance in favor of how Elon Musk opened up Twitter. Uh,
Hmm.
but I mean, there are accounts which are completely fake and fraudulent. There's a couple of Pakistanis who run large X accounts pretending to be Americans, okay? And it's nonstop. There was just a scene which video was released. I forget what airport it was at. I think in Turkey. I could be wrong on that. With somebody tossing a little kid against the ground. Really disgusting video.
Hmm.
Okay. And the person who did it, maybe it was in Russia or Poland or someplace, but the person who did it was from Belarus, is not Israeli, is not Jewish. And all these big accounts are posting these fake accounts that pretend to be American patriot accounts run by people in Pakistan are saying, look
Right.
what the Jews just did. Look how they did to what they did to that child. Look what the Israelis did. And X does nothing about that. Okay. We're not talking about differences of opinion. We're talking about complete fabrications, people pretending to
Right.
be things they're not. We're not even talking about pseudonymous accounts where you are an American and you say you're an American, but you don't want to use your name because you don't want to lose your job. That's very
Right.
different than being a Pakistani who says you're an American patriot in Texas and look how the Jews are taking over the country. I mean, I really think X needs to get a handle on it because it's um, it's really destroying the utility of X to have all of these accounts being manipulated by foreigners and not openly. If you want to get on there and say, I'm sitting here in Islamabad, okay, and I
Mm.
think the Jews are bad, at least we know who you are. But don't say you're in Texas and say the
Right.
same thing. And it's become very putrid. So I'm glad, but there was that whole background of, the Tuckers and the Steve Bannons and the Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and oh, I keep forgetting his name, the guy who drives everybody crazy, the libertarian guy, Thomas Massey.
Oh yeah,
We're
yeah,
fighting for Israel. We shouldn't do anything. We should do nothing. And I can respect the view, but don't pretend that you speak for Trump supporters when you're actually an outlier. Okay,
right,
and
right,
so that was a whole backdrop. So I'm glad that Trump did what he had to do. It's been well received. Uh, obviously, there's no guarantees in anything, but by all, and then there's the CNN leak by Natasha something or other, who was the one, I think she was involved in saying that the laptop was not real. I mean, I don't know if that was her, but she's got a suspicious reputation. And and I think it was an astounding success. I think there is an issue, and maybe Trump has something else in mind of holding Israel back after that. Okay, Trump's view seems to be: we took out those 3 sites, we're set, it's done. You're
right.
never set as long as that regime is there. They've already announced they're going to reconstitute things. They've already announced they still want to destroy Israel. Um, unless something else changes, you've won the game, but you haven't won the series. And again, I'm not saying we need to invade the country. Let Israel do it. Okay. If
Hmm.
Israel had gone another 5 or 6 or 7 days of bombing, you might have seen an uprising. U.S. didn't need to send troops. U.S. didn't need to do anything. But Trump called Netanyahu off in very colorful terms to stop it. And uh, you know, I'm not saying it's an illegitimate viewpoint. Trump, I think, even said, or somebody said in the administration that, you know, we don't want chaos there. And if the Iranian regime had fallen, there would be chaos in the Middle East, and Trump didn't want that. So I'm not saying it's illegitimate, but I don't think anyone should kid themselves. As long as the apocalyptic Mueller regime is there, it's just whether it's a year from now or 3 years from now. There's a phrase with regard to Gaza that people have used. They call it mowing the lawn. That every 3 to 4 years, Israel needs to go back into Gaza because they do major damage to Hamas, but they never finish them off. They
Right.
rebuild, they reconstitute, they grow back, and Israel's got to go in another 3 to 4 years. And Israel's trying to avoid that cycle now in what they're doing in Gaza. But I fear that's what we're going to be dealing with Iran, is that in 2 to 4 years, we're going to have another conflict, and Iran may be better prepared that time. They may know not to show up for a meeting when they get a message, hey, we've got an emergency meeting. And apparently, Israel had so thoroughly penetrated the Iranian regime that it wasn't just a message, show up for a meeting. It was a very
Right.
specific message that the people who received it would have been expecting. Okay. I don't know if it was a code word or what it was, but it was, when they got it, it appeared to be what they would have expected if there was
Hmm.
going to be a legitimate command meeting. And unfortunately, the regime, which is a really brutal regime, I don't think people realize. I don't think most Americans realize how brutal a regime this is. I mean, this is a regime that tortures women to death for showing their hair in public. You know, this is a regime that pulls women off the street if they're wearing the hijab, but not wearing it properly. Okay.
Right.
And so I think that this is something that um, that we've got to, address. And unfortunately, they're now turning their fury on the Iranian people because Iran's government was thoroughly compromised. And they're going to look for spies and they're going to look for conspirators everywhere. So I really do
Right.
feel for the Iranian people what's coming their way.
I do too. And of course, I mean, there's many thoughts about regime changes instigated by external forces and things like that. And, it's not a simple conversation to have, but I completely understand and for the most part agree with the viewpoint that if you're going to get in and do the job, you need to finish it. Otherwise, you're just going to, I mean, you're going to be right back where you started a few years from now, because you get a slightly less bad, someone in charge, but the players behind the scenes are still the same. The funding is still the same. The ideology remains the same. Of course, that's the biggest issue here is the ideology that drives all of this and the religion that drives all of this. Um, and until some of those things change or until something happens to severely hinder their efforts over the next decade or few, it really doesn't amount to a tremendous amount of change long term. So, uh, lastly, on Iran, what about the battle in DC over how this is going to be handled? Whether Trump has the authority to do this, because I remember Obama droning half the world without any authorization to do so. And all the hubbub over that. But what are your thoughts on that before we move on?
Yeah, it's DOA. Dems, because it was so successful and because not a single American lost his or her life in this, um, I don't think Democrats are going to go anywhere. They made some noises about the War Powers Act and things like that. I think it's going absolutely nowhere. I don't even think the Democrats really have the heart to pursue it. That's not to say some of them won't. And it's not to say they won't pursue something futile and stupid. Okay. If you remember that Animal House scene, this situation calls for someone to do something futile and stupid or words to that effect, and we're just the ones
Yeah.
to do it. So, so so I'm not putting it past, but it was too successful. Okay,
Yeah.
if one of those planes had been shot down, if Iranian retaliation was meaningful against the U.S., I mean, it might still happen. I'm not saying it's not going to happen,
Right.
but as
No,
we
same,
sit here
same.
right now,
It's not over.
it hasn't
Yeah.
happened, and you know, so I think it's over. I think this goes in the win column for Trump. I would have rather seen it with the Iranian people being given an opportunity to take back their country. This
Yeah.
is a government that was essentially imposed on them. There are no free elections there. They have elections, but they decide who's allowed to run. And so there's no meaningful elections, brutal regime, um, and I wish a different outcome for the people of Iran, but there's only so much we can do. So I think this is a win. I think there's rumors today, lots of talk today, that this will usher in an expansion of the Abraham Accords, which were the agreements between Israel and I can't remember, it was 3 or 4 Arab governments to normalize relations, and that it will be expanded to others. There's talk about Syria and Lebanon possibly coming into it. As long as Hezbollah was there, as long as Iran was all powerful, none of those governments could take that risk. And so this may be, I mean, if Trump's plan is we're not going to take down the Iranian regime because it will be chaos and we won't know what
Mhm.
will ensue. And again, I understand that viewpoint. It's not an illegitimate viewpoint. Um, what we're going to do is we're going to isolate them. We're going to give them uh, the one thing they hate more than anything, which would be Israel establishing relations with countries in the Arab world. I mean, Iran's not Arab, in the Muslim world. And
Right.
so maybe that's the plan. Maybe that's the plan.
No, I mean, agreed, and agreed. Shifting gears slightly here, New York City, which has gone full on commie, and that's not even hyperbolic anymore to say that, because we have a self-described democratic socialist who won the Democratic nomination in the mayoral race. So and this is someone that we have covered too. Can you share a little bit about who they are, where they're coming from? This and this, I don't see this going anywhere good. We'll just say that.
No, I mean, this is a real bum. Okay. This is a bad guy. This is a guy who's a total fraud, portrays himself as, oh, social justice, the people, free groceries. Meanwhile, he comes out of a movement. He founded Students for Justice in Palestine on his campus at Bowdoin. I mean, this is the sort of person the Bowdoins of the world are pumping out. These social justice warriors combined with the Islamism aspect of it. And It's very dangerous, something we've talked about on the website for a decade or more. The Red Green Alliance, leftists joining with Islamists to tear down our society. People who have nothing in common ideologically, combining because they have a common ideological enemy, which is the United States, which is capitalism, Westernism, and Israel. And so this is a bad guy. Nobody should kid themselves. This is really the byproduct of our failed educational system that elevates people like this. Very smooth talker, very adept at maneuvering. And it goes to show that at the destruction of the educational system has consequences, and this guy is one of the consequences. That this is what we're producing. This is the best Democrats in New York City can produce: is a communist, jihadist, anti-American, anti-Israel, social justice warrior, and they're eating it up and they're loving it. This is not just this guy. This is a significant portion of the Democratic Party. And it's a warning sign. This guy is a warning sign to the impact that the radicalization of our education system has had. He's only been an American for like 6 or 7 years. His mother's on record saying he doesn't even think of himself as an American, but he has, much like AOC, he has very much tapped into a generational attitude that hates our country at its core, and that hates our system at its core. He's wealthy. He comes from a wealthy family, and I think his mother was some sort of either TV or Hollywood producer. His father, I think, is a professor. This is very, kind of radical chic, anti-American, dangerous person. The question, but not just that. Um, so the left wing of the Democratic Party produced this guy, and the best the centrists in the Democratic Party could produce was Andrew Cuomo. I mean, seriously, that's how decrepit the you know uh, the butcher of COVID, whatever his nickname is. The best they could do to counter this guy is Andrew Cuomo. This is a lesson not just about the radicalization of a significant percentage of the Democratic Party, but how vacant and lacking energy and vision most of the Democratic Party is. I'm sure there are a lot of people who just hated Andrew Cuomo so much because of the lockdowns and his mishandling of COVID and his lying about it, that they said, you know what, I'll vote for the commie jihadist before I'll vote for Andrew Cuomo. And I understand that. And it'll be very interesting in the general election how much of this guy's vote were people who just couldn't stand Andrew Cuomo.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, it's not entirely difficult to understand why Democrats are having a very difficult time relating to voters when, this is who they're putting up. They don't really have a deep bench. You either have these like psycho American hating youngsters, or you have people like Andrew Cuomo, and there's like no one in between. There's no one that provides anything that is at all in touch with the vast majority of the population. You know, and I know we talked about before, which still just makes me chuckle, how they're having all these forums about trying to relate to men, but when you become the party that advocates for disfiguring for the rest of their lives little children, that advocates for men in women's bathrooms, men in women's sports, and over sexualization of tiny children, all of these kinds of things. And then you start dragging in these people who have absolute hatred for the country and the system that even allows them to say the things that they do, because we all know the very obvious truth, which is that they 100% could not say these things in the places where they come from, whether in this generation or the previous generation. Like they'd probably have their heads chopped off, and their entire family and lineage killed as a result, or they'd be disappeared or whatever. So it's, I mean, I guess I have to laugh, because if I don't, I don't know what the other response would be, but it's very telling. And, I just don't know how this plays well for them in the long term. Not that, the right has it figured out. I'm just saying that they seem to be in pretty dire straits if this is all that they can put up, especially in a place like New York City, you know?
Yeah.
So
So
very,
it
very
will be interesting, but this is the Democrat Party. I mean, we might as well get used to it, okay? Um, Whether it's 20% of the party or 40%, maybe it's more than 50%, are off the charts crazy and radical. And this
yes,
guy is a symbol of them.
right. Meanwhile, the rest of the country has swung more to the center because they're so tired of the extreme, and they just want to be able to live their lives, and we see this time and time again. But that's a political science discussion unto itself. um Lastly, lots of exciting things happening at the foundation, but one that we did want to talk about was an update from the Equal Protection Project. um do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. I mean, we are in expansion mode. Um, we passed our 100th challenge. I think I mentioned this on a prior podcast. We've now challenged over 100 colleges and universities on over 400 programs and scholarships that were discriminatory. We are expanding um, outward. We just filed, I won't name it yet, but we should have an article about it on Fox News this weekend at a new agency, not just the Department of Education. And so there's a lot doing. I mean, we're busier than ever. People may or may not know, we haven't really promoted it. We probably should. We added our first full-time attorney last December, which has significantly helped our capacity. And we have a new attorney, a more senior attorney, starting July 1. And so we have more opportunities now than we've had at any point um, in the last 2.5 years, 2.25 years since we started Equal Protection Project. So it's a very exciting time, and we'll see what happens. There's no guarantees about anything, but we're busier than ever. We're growing. We don't want to grow just for the sake of growing, but we just have not had the people to do it. It's, that saying, good help is hard to find. It's true. We needed to find the right person. It's not that there aren't good people out there, but they had to be a good fit for us and our personality and the way we do things, which is not very structured. I was going to say not very organized. That's true also, but we get a lot done, and we're kind of free form. Not we don't like have a lot of rules and regulations and guidebooks and checklists and things like that. And it takes a certain personality to be comfortable with that. And
We are
so
comfortable with that, we being the two of us. Sometimes I wonder about the rest of the world, but so far it's worked really well.
so EPP is going great. We're always very cautious. We're always very conservative in how we spend our money. We don't do things frivolously, and but we're very pleased. And I think what you're going to see, and Kimberly can talk a little about this, I think you're going to see, an expansion and a adjustment in our CRT website to adjust for changing times. I mean, just because something might have worked 3 years ago, times change. We now have the Trump administration. It's a very different world. And how we do things at EPP, we're adjusting. And I think we'll adjust somewhat at the CRT website also.
Yeah, and so and like you said, I'm super excited about where we are. There's just so much potential and so many things happening, and I'm really excited to start getting some some more bodies and seats to help us do work that we've long envisioned and are now able to start making happen. And that's super exciting to me, to take these ideas and then watch them actually turn into something that's real, and not just a product that's real, but something that is actively affecting change, actively moving the needle. Because something that every single one of us that work with the Legal Insurrection Foundation, whether, as an employee or contractor or whatever, we genuinely care about this. And I'm very concerned about the world that I'm going to leave to my kids. And so I'm forever grateful that I get to spend my time doing everything in my power to make sure that what we're doing is helping in any way we can to leave things better off than how we found them. But all of that to say, on the critical race site, so we started, just I'll give the very brief Cliff's Notes version of the history of that, if in case you're not aware. Criticalrace.org started peak COVID. We had a body of research around the time when parents were getting a window into what was happening in their children's education, and are going, wait a minute, this is not just, maths and language arts. There's a whole lot of other things going on here, and everyone had, was losing their minds, rightfully so, about what their children were learning. So because we've always focused more on higher education, we decided to start looking at the overt critical race training, critical race theory activities happening on college campuses. And I think we started off with about 125 schools where we'd compiled some data. And rather than just running an op-ed, we decided to turn it into a map, basically a clickable map. So that was the beginning of a database that now houses over 700 institutions of higher education. We've expanded. We even have what we call elite private schools. That's K through 12, because we understand the pipeline there, that these schools become pipelines to the Ivies. The Ivies are pipelines to many very key positions in media and government, and in all of these places that are really foundational to um, our society as it currently stands. So we've looked at so many different things. Veterinary schools, which we did kind of on a joke, mainly because we had a headline that we happened to think was really funny. And we started poking around, and we found all kinds of DEI stuff happening there, unfortunately. And so it's a great resource, and we hear time and time again from parents, from prospective students that are, looking at different schools, maybe in different states. Our research there was actually cited in a congressional resolution, and it's been mentioned and referenced in almost 200 media hits since we launched the site a few years ago. What I'm really enjoying, and something that we started doing much more of, we've done a little bit kind of scattered over the years, but we've really focused our attention into taking the data that we have and pulling things from it, right? So we're creating original reports based on our existing data. And so what that looks like is, one of the things we had looked at last year was we looked at states where states that had taken some kind of legislative or executive action against DEI in higher education. So then we looked at what the states did. We went to the larger schools in those states, and we decided to look and see what was happening on those campuses, and if it appeared as though they were in compliance with the new state rules and regulations on this particular subject. And so we put together a report there, we published it, and even though it's not direct pressure, right? So it's not like what we do with the Equal Protection Project, where we are filing a legal complaint or some kind of complaint with the federal government. over what we believe to be a discriminatory program, these schools still get calls from national reporters asking whether or not they're in compliance with, state bill, whatever. And so it's a different way of providing accountability. It's a different way of ensuring that these schools and anyone who wishes to engage in this kind of thing overtly knows that there is someone watching, and that we will be cataloging and we will be publishing our findings on that. And so it's been very interesting, especially since Trump took office. But we have a lot more of those types of things happening. We have a lot more in the works too, for how the work, our existing work, is kind of evolving and developing a little bit, and how we'll still maintain what we have, which is, this great historical record now. Because one of the things that we did when we started the site was, and we do this just kind of as general practice, we archive everything. So we can see how the language has changed. We can see how they move things, where they move things to, based on the previous links that we had. So that's been really fascinating too. So just know that we have a lot in the works there, and we're just, overall, I know I keep using the word excited, but it really is an exciting time. We've spent several years doing a lot of the hard work of building the foundation, and the work remains. But I'm very, very pleased with where we are with the work that we've been able to accomplish so far, and I'm really excited about everything that's ahead. So, be on the lookout, and we'll try and keep you updated. We're trying to be much better about that, for what's happening at criticalrace.org. Um, and yeah, I think that's all I have there. I could keep talking, but I'm going to cut myself off before I get too deep into the weeds. Any parting thoughts?
No, that's it. Very busy, very active year so far. And the news cycle moves so quickly. Who knows what our next podcast will be about?
No joke. No joke. Because we have Independence Day next week, which is crazy that, it seemed like April was 6 months long, and then now all of a sudden it's July. So I know my kids are always super excited about that. They love the fireworks and cake and pie and all the things that come with that. So but I think that's it for today. So I want to thank you for tuning in to our 29th episode of the Legal Insurrection podcast. And just know that if we are absent for any period of time, it's because we are very, very busy trying to save America from the brink of communist wokeism destruction. So, but you can find links to everything that we discussed here. It is covered on the blog at legalinsurrection.com/29. Again, that's legalinsurrection.com/29. If you enjoy listening to our podcast, particularly what Professor Jacobson has to offer and what he has to say, I always enjoy his thoughts on this. Be sure to like, share, click all the buttons, just not the down thumb. And we will see you next time.